Stay put, everyone. This is more than a tale of a comeback. This is the sound of a woman emerging from the wreckage as everyone else looks on in utter shock. Teyana Taylor didn't cry in front of the camera after losing everything that was trying to find her. She did not plead for pity. She took a much riskier action. She fell silent. Silence is a weapon of mass destruction in a society that thrives on noise. First, it was the dissolution of a marriage that everyone believed to be unbreakable. We all believed we had a piece of the pain, the cracks, and the whispers that followed. However, as you were grieving for the deceased Teyana, anew in the darkness, strength was growing. The internet exploded just now. Teyana's new relationship has been formally confirmed, but there aren't any pictures from the red carpet. There were no tagged Instagram posts or leaked paparazzi photos, just one terrifying statement that rocked the business. "I'm keeping my peace this time." Why is she keeping him hidden? Because he's not just another celebrity behind the curtain. He is such a behemoth of riches and power that the entire business may be overshadowed by his shadow alone. It's not only love here, it concerns a high-stakes, high-security partnership that some influential people are frantically trying to hide. The private aircraft are monitored. All of the upscale hotels are under lockdown. And it's getting ugly with the rumors. The Hollywood hierarchy will never be the same if his name is revealed tonight. You're not only witnessing a disclosure, a reckoning is taking place. The reality we've discovered is too dangerous to ignore and too hot for television. So stay just where you are. Furthermore, silence is never meaningless in celebrity culture. It's loaded, it waits, it observes. Additionally, it disrupts narratives that people believe to be settled when it breaks. There is no romance at the start of this novel. A deliberate breakdown is the first step. Teyana Taylor was positioned as something uncommon in entertainment before the press reduced her to rumors and popular subjects. Intentional, quiet, and disciplined. She was a woman who refused to sell turmoil for clicks and instead cultivated her reputation piece by piece. She gained a level of respect that most celebrities can only hope for because of her temperance. However, it also greatly increased the brutality of what followed. Her Iman Shumpert's marriage was promoted as the ideal equilibrium. Two well-known people managing romantic relationships without the usual Hollywood show. Pictures of the family. Silent pride. They felt as though the turmoil of fame had been kept well out of the way. Supporters thought so. The press took advantage of it. The sector required a useful love story to reference. The door cracked, though the public initially perceived distancing, occasional absenteeism, and fewer moments spent together rather than a scandal. Long before the language changed, the energy did. These events typically begin with the cold front moving in while everyone is busy examining old pictures. The emotional harm had already been done off camera in the rooms where microphones cannot reach by the time the divorce headlines appeared. When strength is used for too long, it develops into solitude, which is where the story takes a terrible turn. Teyana didn't publicly break down after the split. She didn't use interviews as a weapon or vent her anger on social media. In a society that is dependent on spectacle, she took a far riskier action. She pulled away. Her silence served as both a defense and a punishment. Quiet ladies are not forgiven by the internet. They are rewritten. Her life was abruptly no longer her own. With speculation filling in the blanks, she refused to explain. Strangers were writing a script in the comment sections. Then came the story of the rebound. The tone immediately altered upon Aaron Pierre's arrival. There was no turmoil here. It was tenderness, controlled looks, little words, and body language that speaks for you. Fans romanticize this type of connection because it feels earned rather than promoted. People claimed she was getting better. They believed she deserved to be happy at last. They claimed she was at last free of the agony. However, healing can be hurried for the sake of a public show. He tends to reopen wounds rather than heal them. The romance ended as softly as it had started. Absence, no spectacular departures, no public blaming. And Teyana vanished into nothingness once more. For an audience that had invested emotionally without her consent, there were no explanations or answers. That second silence raised suspicions. There were cryptic captions. Rare paparazzi photos show a weary expression beneath the eyes. Posts that, for no apparent reason, seemed heavy. People started speculating, and the melancholy became the basis for stories. Furthermore, once lit, narrative fuel never goes out until it is completely extinguished. This is the issue with celebrity. People tend to assume what caused a woman's sorrow when she doesn't explain it, and they hardly ever choose kindness. The sounds subsided into background static after several months. As the internet progressed, or so it believed, since something was carefully and silently developing behind the scenes as the public's focus shifted elsewhere. The confirmation followed. No fancy magazine spread, no exclusive sit-down interview, no press run, just one line that completely altered the course of her public image. A new relationship verified on her terms, and a statement, "I'm keeping my peace this time, because protection entails a threat." That sentence struck like a heavy gavel in a courtroom that was unaware that a trial was taking place. Peace suggests past acts of emotional, mental, or otherwise. All of a sudden, this no longer felt soft. The story itself emerged from the lack of specifics. No timeline, no face, No name, just unbreakable boundaries. Furthermore, boundaries are interpreted as provocative in celebrity culture. Supporters didn't wait for information. Like bloodhounds, they searched for hints. Pixel by pixel, upscale places were examined. Jewelry was used as evidence by the state. Alleged sightings evolved from reflections in wine glasses and windows. Private jet databases were used to track flights. Digital corkboards were used to map out professional associations. The internet evolved as an unpaid monitoring tool. Believing that the truth was right in front of them, the story then veered off course and became much more poisonous. She made an improvement. She only dates wealthy men. Status, not love, is what she's after. In an instant, the tone changed from one of interest to one of accusation. The same cliches that have emerged after decades of being used to denigrate strong women: climber, manipulator, opportunist. The methodical eradication of her past just made it worse. The same woman who had sacrificed, mothered, and invested years into a marriage was suddenly reduced to a cartoonish representation of a gold digger. All of a sudden, the same woman who remained silent during heartbreak was painted as cold and cunning. Quietness was no longer a symbol of power. It was construed by the court of public opinion as guilt. What stopped industry insiders cold, however, is this: she didn't answer. No petty retorts, no subtweets, and no well-planned PR release to damage her reputation. Nothing. Furthermore, silence following an accusation is seen in the context of gossip culture as either complete control or complete breakdown. Whispers started to circulate that the concealment had nothing to do with the drama. It was about safeguarding something far more important than merely her heart. It wasn't anything that belonged online. Something that, if revealed too soon, might have repercussions that went much beyond a social media post's likes and shares. Theories started to proliferate in the void. The man wasn't in entertainment, according to some. Others asserted that he was strong enough to purposefully avoid being seen. A man whose right to privacy was a need of his job, not a personal preference. Some murmured that once when his name came to light, it would compel awkward discussions in affluent circles that favored darkness over light. Teyana, meanwhile, kept her cool. There was a terrible silence. No outward signs of happiness or dread. People who were expecting a party or a breakdown were uneasy about the serenity. Also, when a lady quits performing, it puts the same institutions designed to ease her suffering in jeopardy. It was not a revelation. It was turned down. An unwillingness to defend herself in front of others who had already made judgments on her. An unwillingness to fuel the machine that had previously devoured her. Refusing to pass out in front of the cameras. And there are repercussions for that rejection, because when the public is kept in the dark long enough, the revelation not only informs them, but explodes. The identity of the new man is not the focus of this first chapter. It concerns why his identity is so important that it is being safeguarded at all costs. Additionally, the fans won't be shocked when the identity is revealed. If the rumors circulating within the inner circles are true, it will compel the entire business to face up. This isn't a romantic tale. It is the preface to a much more costly and sinister chapter. Furthermore, the public opinion court is unaware that the trial has already started. The non-disclosure agreements are signed in blood red ink as the fancy automobiles arrive at unmarked doors. The world waits for a mistake that might never happen. At unmarked doors. The world waits for a mistake that might never happen. However, the pressure is increasing, and there's always someone talking in the realm of high-stakes romance. What will it cost her when they do? She wonders. The internet didn't only respond when the confirmation came in. It launched not with joy or relief, but with a mistrust that grew into a deadly fixation. Because Teyana Taylor broke the unwritten agreement between the star and the audience when she announced a new relationship without providing a name, a face, or a timeline. She moved on, and the public wasn't upset. They were upset because she didn't request authorization and she failed to present the receipts. At that point, the tone changed from one of interest to one of outright digital persecution. As proof, every previous period of her life was brought back into the spotlight. She no longer viewed her marriage to Iman Shumpert as a failed love affair. It was rephrased by insiders as a strategic partnership that was past its prime. To be examined by armchair psychologists, old interviews were edited, the audio was improved, and smiles were slowed down to a frame-by-frame crawl. Long before the papers were filed, they said she had outgrown him. He was constantly holding her back, and she was never truly happy. All of it was said with the terrible assurance of a viral thread, yet none of it was confirmed. The chapter about Aaron Pierre's rebound was then reopened and completely destroyed. Her time with him was reframed as a trial run for the actual aim rather than a time for healing. Commentators started implying that he was merely a narrative that diminished a genuine human connection to a stepping stone to something more profitable. The inference was seething with poison. The purpose was never love. Elevation was. Furthermore, in the murky core of gossip culture, advancement is always associated with two things: wealth and influence. At that point, the theories became more conspiratorial, gloomy, and frigid. Anonymous reports, some from irate stylists, and former assistants started to imply that the new man wasn't well known as he couldn't afford it. And not because he lacked status, but rather because fan pages and red carpets don't cross with his world. They described a man whose right to solitude was imposed upon him rather than an aesthetic preference. Leaked flight manifests and screenshots of bank transfers appeared on Discord channels, but were quickly removed by top legal teams before they could appear on popular blogs. Posts of alleged sightings in the south of France and private islands in the Maldives were quickly removed, indicating expert action. Oversharing accounts went private overnight, and the internet noticed something unsettling. There was no leak that was sticking. This one refused to circulate in a field where secrets are the main currency. Someone was meant by that. The blast radius was being actively contained somewhere, and tremendous leverage is implied by containment of that size. The animosity for Teyana grew as the rumors circulated. What started out as "who is he?" changed into "what she's trying to hide." The vocabulary became strongly gendered, accusatory, and loaded. The same old cliches reappeared: manipulator, social climber, and opportunist. Without hesitation, the internet recast her, removing its most harsh and ancient texts. Here's the contradiction, though, that no one wanted to face. The concealment made no sense if the real purpose of this relationship was clout. Anonymity was detrimental if status was at stake. Silence was the worst tactic if attention was the goal. Unless, of course, the one thing she was frantically, intentionally avoiding was attention. Those who watched the industry whispered that her composure wasn't a sign of disinterest. It was self-control. The commotion did not overwhelm this woman. This mother purposefully starved it. This type of self-control was acquired the hard way. After years of being openly criticized for each survival decision made under duress, at that point, the timeline became significant. Her rapid withdrawal following each emotional outburst was observed by others. How often she eschewed explanation in favor of absence. How infrequently, despite the narrative's severe tilt against her, she stood up for herself. Patterns of disengagement as a self-preservation tactic rather than manipulation surfaced. But the internet doesn't pay full control. Comment sections became fake tribunals where the defendant was not permitted to speak, and it punishes it with a zeal that resembles a blood sport. Influencers made money off of the conjecture by creating whole businesses based on unsubstantiated claims and unspoken origins. Beyond Teyana's control, the tale spread, assuming a life of its own in the murkier reaches of the internet. Nothing came from her camp, however, no explanation, no correction, and no outward indications of stress. That absence started to feel heavy, purposeful, and deliberate, because it is not a sign of weakness to remain silent in the face of an organized attack. It's a declaration. It's a claim that witnesses are not yet necessary for the truth. There was something even more disturbing going on behind the scenes. Prominent members of the industry, who typically have a viewpoint on everything, they abruptly stopped participating in the conjecture. High-profile accounts removed, posts, and references to her name were steered clear of locations where rumors are common, like wine. Those who crossed it were dealt with tactfully and effectively, as though an invisible line had been carved in the sand. The subject became radioactive. Why? Because this was more than a romance according to those who were most interested. It had to do with being close to a universe that doesn't follow the norms of fame. It was about getting into a field where some names aren't used carelessly because they have real-world repercussions. Once more, the focus of the story changed, from who he is to why people are so scared to mention his name. No one genuinely wants the answer to that question. Teyana, meanwhile, never lost her composure, and she showed up in brief, controlled glances, calm, attentive, and even aloof. She didn't appear happy in the theatrical way that famous people do when they want to make fun of a new romance. She appeared non-defensive. She simply had a balanced appearance. A public situation to anticipate emotional collapse or triumphant gloating was profoundly shaken by this posture. Because ladies who fail to show up on time produce a unique kind of backlash and disturb the whole spectacle of stardom. The rhetoric of the critics became more heated. They presented her privacy as avoidance, her silence as haughtiness, and her refusal to describe as evidence of a nasty thing. It was reframed as cool calculation, the very calm that implied complete control. Power turned into a danger. However, it became increasingly clear that Teyana Taylor wasn't playing the same game as everyone else, the more forcefully the narrative was used against her. This was not a new project launch. This was not a permanent rebrand. Pertinent damage control for a nasty divorce was not what this was. Containment was the strategy. Furthermore, containment is only necessary when something extremely volatile needs to be protected. It's a cruel irony. A lady who had already paid for her visibility with her peace of mind was expected to be completely transparent by the internet. She had obviously determined that something was no longer public property, and they wanted access to it. The industry is still feeling the effects of that decision to say no. Because nothing remains hidden forever, the revelation will come when it does. There won't be any rumor about it. it will be perceived as a disturbance of the whole social structure. Additionally, it will be the kind of revelation that makes everyone reevaluate all of their preconceptions about her background, and the nature of power. This is no longer about romance. It concerns the balance of power over who gets to vanish and who can defend themselves without facing consequences. One fact is becoming unavoidable as the cacophony increases and the dangers become more overt. This connection, whatever it may be, was never intended for general consumption. Additionally, when the curtain is eventually pulled away, the fallout will be more intense the longer it remains hidden. Because such big secrets don't remain hidden. They wait for the ideal opportunity to demolish. There was no term for the breaking point. By now, it had come in terror. Additionally, this story had evolved into the murky depths of real-world power and outgrown the shallow waters of gossip. The subject of Teyana Taylor's current partner was resolved. Who suddenly didn't want to be mentioned at all was the query. There was a change in the digital environment. Within hours, accounts that had been actively speculating for weeks came to a halt. Mid-argument, viral Reddit and Twitter threads disappeared, replaced by the statement, "This content is no longer available." Influencers who had secretly leaked information and promised exclusive tea drips shifted to more secure, everyday subjects. At that point, the industry was struck by the realization like a goods train. This was no longer being disregarded. They were suppressing it. The ultimate tell in celebrity culture is avoidance. Power scares people into silence. New clout-chasing stories don't. The exhilaration gave way to a sharp, anxious caution in the discourse behind closed doors. Major star publicists ceased answering calls when Teyana's name was brought up. With a never-before-seen degree of legal anxiety, bloggers started to hedge their words. Words like allegedly, unconfirmed, and reported became so commonplace that they hardly made sense in sentences. In the gossip world, even the loudest, most confident voices started to whisper. Why? Because people encountered more opposition the closer they came to the truth. Furthermore, it wasn't the kind of opposition a public relations firm would provide. It was the kind of resistance that resembles an externally locked door. Resistance suggests boundaries that are upheld by a force much more powerful than the general consensus. It suggests a degree of security that influence can always demand but money can't always purchase. The irony is incisive enough to cause bleeding. Teyana had been portrayed for years as the strong, approachable queen, a person whose life could be passed, evaluated, and devoured by the masses like a seasonal sitcom. She had maintained a semblance of dignity throughout the collapse. Despite the fact that her marriage to Iman Shumpert had been widely publicized enough to draw constant criticism, when it was over, she paid for it with money that the general public hardly ever recognizes. Silence the pain. Public warfare and the scorched earth campaign that would have generated 1,000 more headlines were absent. She simply took the blow. Then came Aaron Pierre, a chapter that outsiders who required a tidy, linear story to follow viewed as a rebound. The audience experienced a perverted sense of entitlement when that ended as well. She never agreed to provide the answers they demanded. Additionally, when she didn't supply them, the penalty started. Celebrities are punished by the internet for denying access, not for making mistakes. Therefore, it wasn't interpreted as a sign of maturity when she announced this new relationship without providing the information the public believed they deserved. It was interpreted as an act of defiance. And when a woman refuses to display her vulnerability on a regular basis, it often results in a recognizable and unflattering reaction. In an attempt to discredit her and turn her into a typical opportunist, the machine attempted to question her. However, there was a fundamental problem with that plan. Teyana remained upright. No defensive note, app, apologies were made. Instagram Live did not feature any emotional monologues. Furthermore, no leaks were timed to undermine her reputation. When combined with complete confidence, there was nothing but a persistent, unflinching silence. Systems based solely on exposure should be unnerved. A fresh and more terrifying insight began to seep into the inner circles as the weeks went by. This woman wasn't concealing anything embarrassing or scandalous. This was a woman protecting something of great value. The focus of the conjecture changed from who he is to what he stands for. This had nothing to do with an athlete, rapper, or actor. It was about being close to a world that is separate from the filthy fingers of entertainment rumors. It concerned circles of influence that only function offline. In spaces where confidentiality is a must for admission and non-disclosure agreements are the norm. The term protected then began to appear in private encrypted conversations. Protected by structure, by a system that makes sure certain names are never entered into a search engine, rather than by a public relations team. If this man existed in a society where the greatest power is anonymity, being exposed would be more than just a hassle. It would be a complete upheaval of his world. It would threaten a structure that would rather not be seen. This explains the saga's most peculiar development. This secret lasted for months, in a time when most secrets are sold to tabloids within 5 minutes. The most incriminating evidence we have is that alone. It demonstrates that those in Teyana's immediate vicinity are not just devoted, but also terrified. Teyana's public persona, meanwhile, became more incisive, focused, and purposeful. Her looks weren't coincidental. She used vocabulary that was millimeter precise. She talked of peace, but she never mentioned the blood, sweat, and tears she had to shed to get it. The cameras didn't buy her happiness. She set an example of self-control. And because the audience isn't prepared to accept closure without a complete disclosure, those boundaries cause discomfort. The arc is what they desire. The trauma is what they desire. The dramatic conclusion where the star breaks down and spills the beans is what they desire. However, Teyana declined to give the script. The internet then attempted to craft its own conclusion. They presented her composure as icy logic. They presented her privacy as a game of manipulation. They presented her refusal to provide an explanation as an example of undeserved haughtiness. However, since there was no contradiction to take advantage of, none of it stuck. Furthermore, there was no public error to exploit. The armor didn't appear to have cracked. Eventually, the story started to lose steam at that point. Reaction is what makes stories work. Outrage is fueled by a reaction. The aggressive speculation started to starve for air without Teyana's involvement. The narrative continued. It stalled, which puts everyone involved at even more risk. Narratives that are stuck don't end. A spark is what they wait for. According to industry watchers, the facts will not eventually come to light through a conventional gossip channel or a leaked photograph. It will come unexpectedly and in an unexpected setting. The legal system, a business association, and filing, or an unanticipated effect. And when it happens, it will compel a complete reassessment of everything that preceded it. It will clarify the necessity of the silence. It will clarify why maintaining the concealment was necessary for survival. It will clarify why some influential people opted to keep their distance instead of making comments. A disclosure awaiting a headline is not what this is. It's a reckoning that is awaiting its moment. Teyana Taylor maintained control over her narrative. She retracted it by staging a coup. She took this action at the expense of public comfort, being misinterpreted and facing accusations. Authority doesn't always appear to be a loud triumph. At times, it appears as though a woman is standing in the middle of a hurricane and isn't blinking. She handed them a mirror in place of the spectacle that the internet requested. By doing this, he revealed something much more disturbing than the name of any guy could ever be. The strictest restrictions on public access. When a celebrity determines that their life is no longer shared, the outrage isn't motivated by curiosity. It's about the anger that comes when a privilege is taken away. The reason this story remains unanswered is not a lack of knowledge, but rather the withdrawal of consent. And the world will have to endure the discomfort of ignorance until that permission is granted once more, if it ever is. Since the most unsettling reality of all is that some you just don't belong to stories. The consequences are imminent. We're plugging the leaks. The solicitors are quite vigilant. Furthermore, Teyana is seated amid a quiet that is more deafening than any scream. You're probably mistaken if you believe you know who he is. You're absolutely mistaken if you believe you know what she will do next. Teyana Taylor just fired the first volley in the new age of the celebrity shadow war. The rich man's identity isn't the question. When she eventually allows him to come out of the shadows, what will happen to the industry? While the rumors are coming to an end, a completely new reality is beginning. If you're not ready to face reality, it's time to stop searching. We know you won't. Though, you can't because this is the only thing that is real in a world full of contrived drama and bogus news. At this point, the actual players are exposed and the curtain comes down. Are you prepared for the moniker that will cause the internet to collapse? Are you prepared for the game-ending truth? The world will never view Teyana Taylor or Celebrity Piece the same way after the last piece of the puzzle is revealed. So subscribe immediately. Don't claim that we didn't alert you. It is 0 on the clock. Didn't alert you. It is 0 on the clock.